Hello and welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm Villain Theory,
And I'm Nelson.
and it's been a while, guys. We haven't seen you guys for almost 2 months. We had a nice little break for December. If anyone follows the YouTube community section, I was a little bit ill, but I'm feeling a lot better now. And we're also moving to a monthly format. So unfortunately, it'll be a little bit less podcast for you guys. But, quality over quantity.
Yeah, and so going forward, I think we're going to be releasing episodes on the third Monday of each month. And so hopefully you're listening to this on or around the third Monday. And then our next episode that we're going to be releasing will then be February 19th. So the third, and then you can just expect, because every single month has a third Monday. It turns out I double checked. So we're good there.
Excellent. That would be awkward, we wouldn't be able to treat this a podcast.
Yeah, there's no podcast in November for some reason. I don't know. It just doesn't have a third Monday.
Well, today's topic, guys, is going to be about multi-aspect heroes. Kind of a general video about the concept because it's really fascinating. I love the multi-aspect heroes. They're some of my favorites.
I'm really excited. Since we have started the podcast, I've broken back out Adam Warlock. I've broken back out some of these multi-aspect heroes, and they are just so much fun. You can do so many unique things with these where you can pull in and get interactions between two different aspects or four different aspects in some of the cases. And it's just, they're special. They're very special. So I'm excited to hear your expertise on these. And then I feel like I'm going to be more of a listener on this one to learn. But I have some points that I want to make too.
Okay, no pressure on me then. No, I love these characters, and last character I played I think was Spider-Woman with the pool aspect, so that'll be fun to talk about. Yeah,
one of the fun interactions that came up in the Discord is that since Spider-Woman actually has like aggression, justice, leadership, and protection cards in her kit, you actually have to add extra pool to offset to have equal numbers. So like you have +2 for the aggression cards. And so you have to add 2 additional pool cards outside of those that you add for the aggression cards to round it out. And I forgot who it was in the Discord was running into the problem that Marvel CDB was yelling at them because of that interaction. But I was like, oh, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, that's really interesting and really fascinating how she can now have 5 aspects technically within her deck. If you manage to play one from every aspect, she can now get a bigger stat bonus. She can play 5 aspect cards in one turn, from different aspects, and get that plus a total attack, for and defense of 6. I think that makes it, which is really very powerful. Although pretty rare. I don't think I've pulled that off when I've been experimenting with that.
But you just gave me a fantastic idea for a monthly challenge. So maybe if you're listening to this episode, you may have insight into what February's monthly challenge is going to be, because that sounds incredibly fun. I didn't even think about that. But a 666 stat line sounds very evil and very cool. But like that's awesome. That feels like a really cool way to set that up, and probably pretty difficult. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like that'd be challenging.
There is a card that I can see making it easier. So maybe we'll just dive into the new stuff here. Spider-Woman is the original multi-aspect character, and she is the one that can kind of split her deck. Half of it is basically one aspect, half is the other. You have to have an equal amount of both aspects cards within your deck. She can, of course, have basic cards on the side, although the more of those you put in, the less aspect cards you're getting, so the less reliable your stat bonuses. Every time you play those aspect cards, she's getting bigger stat bonuses the first time you play an aspect each turn. What's really interesting with the pool aspect is it has this little card called Plot Convenience, where you can attach aspect cards down there. So she could attach one of her different aspect cards onto it, and you could then draw them off. So that might be useful in the challenge, I imagine. That's a really fun interaction. What I've been enjoying with the pool aspect with Spider-Woman is she can get those big stats like we're talking about, and the pool aspect has this little card called Stick-to-Itiveness, which lets you ready up and make use of them. So I think the pool aspect has been a really natural fit for Spider-Woman.
Nice. Yeah, I think I have not tried pool with any of the multi-aspect heroes. Yeah, no, I haven't. But out of the multi-aspect heroes, I think Spider-Woman is probably my favorite, mainly because we don't have the restrictions that some of the other ones have. Now, we still have the restrictions. We have to have an equal amount, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like you can pull off a lot of combos. And one of the things that I came to the realization of while I was preparing for this episode is that Spider-Woman being the multi-aspect hero that I really enjoy, I think was a precursor to my newfound like enjoyment of two-handed plays. And so you can pull off some of these combos between two aspects, which is basically just playing two-player almost like where like I was like, oh, we have this med team which can heal up, my aggression, Wolverine, which is a really cool, and I can only do that in Spider-Man. It's like, no, really, you can do that with two players. It's just like how you're going to do that. But in solo, you get that two-player, that two-handed feel where you get the interactions between the aspects. And I feel like Spider-Woman is the best one to facilitate those interactions because you're not locked to more harsh requirements or restrictions. But I have not tried pool, but my next tee-up question for you is, what is your favorite combo or aspect combo to play with Spider-Woman? Because you can only pick two. Which ones are they?
That's such a good question. And something I want to point out about Spider-Woman that I fully believe, hand on heart, is maybe putting Paul aside for a second. I actually haven't played her, in all the combinations with that. But of all the main normal aspects, you can combine them in any way, shape, or form, and you can build a really fun deck, a really powerful deck. So that's another amazing part of her design. And I do love what you're saying. Like, it's kind of like two player and one player, and so that's really fun. I feel like this is going to be quite a common one, but I feel like if I had to pick one, I do like leadership and protection. A little bit like you're saying about med team there, healing allies. That's so much fun. I think the classic build is, Captain Marvel, keep her healed, ready her up, use her more, get us a card draw. The more card draw you get, the more aspect cards you can play within one turn, get bigger stats. It all kind of feeds into itself, and it's got this really cool hybrid approach. I'm healing, I've got this ally out, and then I'm getting events, which I'm then playing to build my stats to use basic attacks, or forwarding whatever you need. I'm going to throw in another one just very quickly. What I was playing with the pool aspect was actually pool and leadership, because the pool allies do not have consequential damage, so I was just readying them. I had Kid Pool with like 4 or 5 upgrades or something. And at one point I had 3 command teams on the board, which was right at the end, sadly, but I got a lot of damage out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, she just has so many fun interactions to play. And so, like, I guess if we're talking about multi-aspect heroes, I think Spider-Woman is a good one to start. Like, what are you how do you deck build for Spider-Woman, or what are the differences in deck building for Spider-Woman, or I guess really any of these multi-aspect heroes? What are the considerations that you're looking at out that are different than when you're building for one of the lame, boring single aspect heroes?
Honestly, you joke, but I've actually been playing a lot of Arkham Horror lately. I received some as gifts. Those characters generally all have, not all, but most of them can actually build into different, their equivalent of aspects. So that's been something I really enjoy there, because I do love those multi-aspect heroes. And for Spider-Woman, it's tricky because I approach each of the characters differently. But I think the thing you can approach, all together, which is valid for all of them, is you need to figure out how much can you take from the other aspect and kind of plan accordingly. Because if you've ever deck built for Spider-Woman, I know, Nelson, you will have run into this. I'm pretty sure most people listening will have. You want to put in more cards than you can kind of fit. You'll just blast past. Yeah, you'll blast past that 40 deck size. You might even get up to 50 and be like, hold on a second. You kind of want to be running two of these kind of decks. You want to build 2 decks into one almost, which is very tricky. Yeah. So I think setting realistic limits, going with the essentials, and then kind of layering on top is kind of a nice, steady approach. It's definitely something I do for Spider-Woman. I will quite often just add all the cards I think will be interesting and start to trim them down, keep the ones with the most synergy and, most kind of useful. Not really a one approach that suits all for all the multi-aspect characters, but that's kind of roughly what I look at. And, if I'm building for solo, I'm trying to make him more of a balanced character, which means I've then got 2 aspects to do that, but then it's trying to, evaluate how they work together. So it's another little layer of difficulty there. And, if I'm in multiplayer, it's really interesting to take Spider-Woman into multiplayer, because you're not just deck building around, 4 people or, 3 people or whatever with, these set aspects. She kind of breaks the mold. I would say she usually ends up feeling like kind of like the all-rounder role, a little bit like leadership. She can kind of fit in where she needs, but it really depends what she does, because if she goes justice and leadership, she can just be a threat removal machine, for example.
Right. Yeah, and kind of building into that role based on the player count, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Do you have any like fun recommendations if someone wanted to try Spider-Woman out? And maybe we'll do this for a couple more of the heroes, but like I feel like Spider-Woman is the iconic multi-aspect hero. Whenever I think of multi-aspect, I just my mind goes to Spider-Woman.
Yeah, I will say I think Spider-Woman is the quintessential multi-aspect character as well. I like Adam Warlock a lot, But Spider-Woman, I think you just have that more freedom of which cards to include, and it's also easier to manage because it's not 4 different aspects all at once, in terms of deck building. And I would say to try, if you're newer to the game, or if you find Spider-Woman quite difficult or intimidating, I think the easiest combo is actually Aggression and Justice, because Aggression and Justice pair really nicely. You've got your damage, you've got your threat removal, and by increasing your stats with Contaminant Immunity, which is her card that heals her and gives her a tough, with Pheromones, which stuns and confuses the enemy's not going to be hitting you that much, or you'll be able to heal it, and then you can kind of hit the villain at all angles and keep all your bases covered. In terms of fun interactions, deck I've been theorizing on, I haven't tried yet, is Repurpose Protection combined with the pool aspect, because again, that plot convenience card can hold on to my repurposes for when I need them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be worth the trouble, but I think it'd be really fun. I don't think I'll be taking that against, Expert 2 Ronan if I was, challenged to do it for money. But in terms of just fun gameplay, I think that'll be really fun. So I definitely really like the pool aspect interactions. I think trying to make those work has been a fun challenge for me lately. One of my favorite decks for her that I've made combines actually Aggression and Protection. It uses a lot of the minion-oriented stuff, so it uses like pinned down from Protection to keep the minions around, and it will use like Bring It in Aggression to use some cards from them.
That's cool. So. That's really interesting. Yeah, we just did a deck factory on the Discord for Sneak Attack, and Sneak Attack is... I wish Sneak Attack was more viable in the game. I'll leave it at that. But Sneak Attack with then like Toe-to-Toe, or Sneak Attack with cards that initiate a villain attack, which you can block with the ally that you snuck in, is a really fun interaction, because then you can get a chump block and you get the activation of the toe-to-toe or whatever. So that's another fun one that I have not been trying. But one of the things, I played a 2-player game earlier, and I played Spider-Woman against Mr. Sinister, and Pheromones does not... Mr. Sinister loves Pheromones, because every single time you place a status card on Mr. Sinister, you place 2, 1, 2, or 3 threat on the main. Pheromones places 2 status cards, and so it's like, I have to also thwart here.
That is a rough deal. That is, kind of nasty.
Spider-Woman is really fun. I think you've inspired me to attempt the pool deck with Spider-Woman again, or not again, for the first time, because that sounds fun. Plot Convenience sounds like a card that can really open up a lot of fun synergies between the aspects.
Yeah. Another idea I've had with her is, this is kind of because I've actually done a lot of 2-player with pool as well in general. So this is something we've done at 2-player, but Spider-Woman can do on her own. You can bring in some of the pool cards that add the Crisis icon, but you could also run something like Crisis Averted alongside it with Justice, and so there's a lot of fun stuff going on there.
Nice.
What you said about Sneak Attack, that's a card I definitely need to play around with more, because I haven't used it for quite a long time, if I'm honest. I think it's a really interesting card, but like you say, it's not generally up to the mark, I would say, of most leadership builds, but it has a lot of potential, so that's pretty exciting. But I don't think I asked you, what is your favorite combo of aspects on Spider-Woman? Do you have like a go-to that you prefer?
Ooh, I think, honestly, I really do like the Aggression Protection. I feel like that's really fun. I like throwing my allies out there with Boot Camp and then healing them up. I have a lot of fun healing my allies, which I guess you could also do with Leadership as well. But you have all of the big hitting allies, and then I kind of like to run them with like the Energy Spears, so like throw some Guardians in there and then be able to heal them. I've been enjoying that. I played I'm trying to remember what it was now. I think it was a Protection Justice build with Warrior of the Great Web, to be able to bring all of my spider friends to the table, because that's where, Justice, Protection, and Basic are where all of the Web Warriors live. And so bringing that, giving Spider-Woman the Web Warrior trait, then running that I had a lot of fun. I think that was a 2-handed game though, so I had a little bit more time to set up, because it's a slow but powerful build.
Yeah, that's really fun. I love both of those. I don't think I've ever actually done, boot camp alongside, med team kind of thing. That sounds like a really fun one to try.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Battlefield medic.
that's really cool, honestly. I really like that. The Web Warrior sort of thing you're talking about reminds me of a deck I once did for her, which I think was Leadership and maybe Protection or Justice, something like that. But the idea was I wanted to get Warrior of the Great Web on Spider-Woman, so I could play Peter Parker, Spider-Man, the Web Warrior
Yeah.
ally. So I could then put Honorary Avenger on him, so I can then put Sky Cycle on him. It was with
Nice.
protection to heal him, I remember now. That's obviously a very slow, like, you need everything in the right sequence pretty much, so I wouldn't call it, the most competitive deck in the world. It was definitely very slow, but very, very fun to try and get that to come about. She just has so much fun potential. I feel like we could spend a whole episode on her, and, maybe we should one day. There's just so much potential.
She's definitely really fun. Now, I think you enjoy Warlock more than me. Now, I have, since we have started doing content together, I have revisited Warlock and I have revised my statement on I dislike Warlock. I think he moved pretty significantly in my last re-rank hero from like one of my least favorite to probably middle of the pack. But Adam Warlock, let's have a discussion around him where he can bring cards from every single aspect. Actually, he has to. He has to bring an equal number of cards from every aspect and only one X copy of each of those cards. So that's a little bit more of a restriction. So you can't run 2 med teams. You can only run one of the med teams. And that also includes basic cards. You can only run 1x of any card outside of Adam Warlock's kit. And so talk to me about Adam. How does that restriction change? Or I guess how does that restriction hinder? Or being able to bring more aspects to the table? How does that open up some strategies with Adam as compared to Spider-Woman?
Yeah, Adam Warlock's really interesting, and I think I enjoy him more than 95%, I would say, of the player base. He's one of those ones that I see score quite low on polls, which really hurts me because I think he's so fascinating. What you're saying, the restriction to only be able to take one card, from the aspects and from basic, one of each, is a really big detriment in all honesty because it hurts your consistency. You can't build around, say, having 3 repurposes in your deck, a card I famously quite like, because you've only got one. And then you can only have one energy barrier, that kind of thing. So instantly, all those combos become less reliable. And I think that puts people off as well. But on the flip side, you can kind of have like one of all the best cards in the entire game, which is a huge upside. And there are cards already that you can only take one of, which can be some of the unique cards, but specifically the allies. So you can already only take one of those anyway. So ally builds and Adam Warlock go together beautifully. You can throw boot camp in there, but you can also throw any of the leadership cards in as well to boost those allies. So you can do a lot of fun stuff like we were talking about with Spider-Woman with Adam Warlock as well, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of eye-opening moments for me for Warlock is when you basically, I don't know if these were the same words, but you're basically saying that like Adam Warlock is like, we have Cyclops at home, right? He can bring all of the X-Men allies. He can do what Cyclops does. I'm like, yeah, he can. Like, and so the opening up of like those ally builds, or now that we have these side scheme builds, right? Like, because you can only bring one of those, you can bring all the side schemes to the table. So I think my view of Warlock changed when I stopped trying to fit traditional strategies into Adam Warlock. And I started thinking of Adam Warlock as his own entity, his own thing, and build strategies around that. And so instead of trying to find synergies within the cards that you would normally see, like repurpose energy barrier like that, where that's going to be very, very challenging to line up and hit consistently with Warlock because you only get one of those cards. But if you start bringing some new, different, weird strategies that you can't really do with any of the other heroes, that's where Warlock starts to shine. And allies, I think, is a really natural consequence of that, and just really cool. You can bring some stupid cool allies and stupid cool ally builds to the table. But yeah, Warlock also has his Battle Mage ability, where you can discard a card from your hand, and based on the aspect of that card, you get a benefit. Now, I think one of the other things that I want to just talk about, which is just like a rules clarification, is you don't have to discard a aspect card. You can discard a basic card. You don't get any benefit from the hero printed text box, but you can activate all of his upgrades. So any of the upgrades, you can draw cards, et cetera, et cetera. So you can cycle a little bit there. But I want to focus on the Battle Mage ability. And have you built for Battle Mage? Outside of trying to find the cool synergies in the cards, have you ever put cards into the deck thinking, hey, like, I am kind of focusing on Warlock's kit and the aspect cards are there, but really I'm going to be trying to trigger Battle Mage every single turn? Is that something you already try and do? What's the strategy around Battle Mage?
Yeah, I think you need to be trying to trigger Battle Mage every single turn, especially because of those upgrades you've got. So I do like a bigger, amount of aspect cards than basic. if I can minimize the basic cards, that's great. The problem is there's some really good basic cards for him and Mystic. But quite often I will go over 40 cards just to make sure I've got more aspect cards in the deck. And I would say I don't generally add cards with the intention I'm just going to spend them on Battle Mage. But there is kind of a certain strategy around if I put down too many sort of cheap upgrades or important upgrades in one aspect, I'm just going to play all of those and I won't have any of those cards around to use for Battle Mage. So if I'm really relying on, say, protection cards with Battle Mage, and if you use Battle Mage to discard a protection card, you get to heal damage from an ally. I can have all these allies I want to heal, and wait, all my protection cards are stuck on the table. I cannot trigger that healing. So that is kind of a problem. So I need to make sure I've got a certain amount of cards of the aspect I want to prioritize in rotation. But other than that, I'm not otherwise too worried.
Nice. And how does the deck building consideration come into play with how do I want to say this? Maybe situational cards? Like, do you place a higher stock on highly situational cards, knowing that you can pitch them for your Battle Mage ability?
Yeah, I'll be honest with those sort of niche cards, because deck space is so tight, because there are so many good cards in the game, I'm generally not running those niche, maybe will be occasionally useful cards. Leadership especially, Sneak Attack would never make it just because there's so many really good leadership cards. I mean, for Adam Warlock, Clarity of Purpose, because he's got that Soul World Healing, that's super good for him, easy play. Make the Call, you can make the call for all these different allies from your deck. That's, already 2 of them taken up, but it's probably going to be a couple of allies in there. If you're really building for power, it's hard not to take Maria Hill unless you're going for like a trait build. It's very, very difficult. So I would say not too many niche cards, although if it is going to be a niche card, it would be an ally, because I feel like Make the Call is one of Adam Warlock's best cards. It's probably one of the best cards in the game anyway, but just because he can pick from all these things from different aspects in his discard pile, I think that's really useful. And of course, we can't really talk about Adam Warlock without talking about the very famous Wild Tutor deck. Ooh. Now, I think we've got a lot more cards these days, and there's a lot of really fun builds for him. I don't like the myth that that's the way to play him, but I do like the gist of it, that you can tutor cards. You can basically search for all these different cards from different aspects, and some of them have cross sort of interaction between the aspects, which is really fun. So I absolutely love that. One of the cool combos, which is actually very famous from Spider-Woman, which I forgot to mention there, is Rapid Response, the leadership card, and Agent Coulson, the justice card.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Coulson finds a preparation card. Rapid Response is a preparation card. When Coulson leaves play, Rapid Response brings him back. It's an infinite loop of being able to keep that going. So things like that are really, really fun. And then Rapid Response, there you go. There's another one that is hard not to take. I do think these side schemes have added such a layer of interesting sort of interaction to Adam. Call for backup and say Wolverine in the same deck is superb.
Call for backup's good. Anyways, so is there a aspect that you find yourself not okay, so we've talked about leadership, but we have not Sneak Attack. We have Make the Call, we have Call for Backup, we have Rapid Response. Some of these feel like cards that you're looking to remove from your Warlock builds rather than maybe add. Is there an aspect out of the 4, not talking about pool, but is there an aspect out of the 4 that you find yourself struggling to reach that minimum threshold to hit the equal number of the other aspects?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If you asked me what aspect I valued the most, the answer wouldn't be the same here, but because the cards that are really good in this aspect, and the aspect is going to be protection, the cards I love there are really good. But when I'm building a lot of Adam Warlock decks, there aren't always a lot of protection cards I really want to add that synergize with what I'm trying to do. Because unless I'm building defensively, then it's going to be a little bit difficult. And unless I'm building into big stats, then the readies aren't going to be so useful. So I do struggle. I get something like Shield Spell, Med Team, and maybe I'll pick a couple of my favorite allies, but it can be a little bit of a struggle there for me. I think Jocasta is good to try and get another use of Shield Spell. I quite enjoy that. But I do sometimes struggle to fill out those last, 1 to 3 slots in protection.
I gotcha. Yeah. I had Iron Fist. I typically like to go for Iron Fist. That's one of the ones that I'm looking for. And protection is my answer as well. I find that protection really likes to synergize with protection. And so or multiple copies to synergize outside of protection, like we were talking about with Spider-Woman. But some of the like I'm not running a desperate defense in Adam Warlock. 1, I don't really want to be defending, and 2, I have 1 copy, so I hope I draw it at the right time. So I think protection is the harder one. So there are actually a couple other heroes in the game that can use multi aspects. I think Adam Warlock and Spider-Woman are the big two, the ones that I think about. I really like the quintessential word that you used earlier, but we have four others, and that may trip some people up. There are three kind of ones that are obvious or jump to the front, but then there's a fourth one. Who's that fourth one?
So that fourth one is going to be Deadpool, who has this upgrade called Arms to the Teeth, where he gets to go and search his collection for any aspect weapon. So any aspect weapon, he can technically get, he could be playing in the pool aspect, let's say, and then go and get just this, sonic rifle. So technically, he is breaking the aspect barrier.
Yeah, but that's a very, very small breaking the aspect barrier. It's actually not in the deck building part of it. And so the other three are Gamora, Cyclops, and Cable. So let's have a mini discussion around each one of these. Where do you want to start? Which one's your favorite, actually? Which one's your favorite? And then we'll start there.
This is really tough. When I started playing this game, it was around Galaxy's Most Wanted. I really enjoyed Gamora, but I think she's moved back for me slightly. Now, Cyclops I really, really enjoy, but it's got to be one of the new kids on the block. It's Cable. I just really, really enjoy Cable. Now, I don't know if I enjoy his aspect breaking as much as I do enjoy on Cyclops or Gamora, which is an interesting point, but I really enjoy him as a hero.
Yep.
So that's a interesting thing to think about that. I'm not sure, but I really do love, there are so many things you can do with those side schemes that can then trigger off other heroes. And, if you build sort of in a coordinated way for multiplayer, then I think that's really where the sort of, if you build with other heroes, that's really where the magic kind of lies in Cable's deck building.
Yeah, I love Cable. Cable is my favorite out of these four. And nice. Especially in multiplayer, but he can bring those side schemes from any aspect. And yeah, I have a hard time, especially what you were just talking about with the deck building. I have a hard time just not throwing almost every single one of the side schemes into a Cable deck and just bringing them, because he scales off those side schemes to being completed, both in readies, both in resource generation with Great Malkin, both in like his events with Mind Scan and Telekinetic Blast or Telekinetic Attack. I always can never remember which one it actually is, but like he just wants to bring the side schemes to the table, which also give you a benefit when you thwart them down. And so Cable is one of those that I think is just really, really, really powerful in multiplayer. And I mean, he's very fun to play, he's very fun to pilot, but I feel like as more side schemes get printed, my deck building flexibility is decreased. There's an inverse relationship there.
That's interesting. See, I don't normally bring every player side scheme that I can. I will say I bring a lot. I bring more than when he was first printed. I do like to include some of the new ones and keep some of the older ones. Older within reason. It came out very recently.
Yeah, 3 week and not the 2 week old player size.
Exactly. Honestly, exactly. And I will say I think Cable is pretty good even in solo play, and I've always said he's pretty strong, honestly. But I think new card specialized training, which we have talked about, I think, on the podcast before, is just absurdly good.
Yeah.
And if you can get down to Alter Ego, if you're, maybe Justice with Confusers, something like that, or if in multiplayer, it's pretty easy. I think the bunker, the X bunker, is absurd. Mm-hmm. Being able to look through, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 different cards and just pick the one I want for the situation is one of the most satisfying things. I really like searching for cards, so that really suits me really, really well. He was already very high in my estimations, quite high in power, very high in fun, but he's moved up in both with the last couple of hero packs.
Yeah, and even if you're not bringing Confused, Justice to the table or whatever, he has Body Slide. You can just take a quick trip down to Alter Ego, draw a card with Professor, draw a card with X Bunker, flip up with Moira. He likes to be down in Alter Ego, and he has a card in his kit that helps facilitate that, which is pretty neat.
I would love more copies of Body Slide, not just with you in education shuffling. Body Slide is so good.
Body Slide is a lot of fun. Absolutely.
What's your second favorite of these?
Oh, what's my second favorite of these? I think I'm going to go with Cyclops. I like Cyclops a lot. I enjoy kind of the ally army kind of build. The reason that I like Cyclops more than Gamora is probably not necessarily the aspect breaking nature of Cyclops, but I really like the Maria Hill recursion deck, which is just stupid in 4 players, where you get to play Maria Hill multiple times every single round. I have a lot of fun with that. But Cyclops can bring X-Men allies from any aspect. And that can get really powerful because the X-Men allies, thematically, X-Men like to work as a team. X-Men allies really like, having more of them around. They have cards that trigger like Utopia, where you can get more ally slots, and also readying whenever you bring in an X-Men ally. So I like Cyclops. There's just so many X-Men to choose from. And I feel like my deck building is not as hindered as much as it is with Cable, because I feel like, unlike Cable, where I'm looking to maybe cut 1 or 2 side schemes and then flush out the rest of the deck, Cyclops, I don't find myself necessarily running all of the X-Men allies. Now, there are builds out there that do that very effectively, but I have more fun with Cyclops to pick a couple of allies and kind of focus a build around them.
That's really interesting because I don't feel too restricted with Cable. I do feel the pinch a bit, and I think part of that is because side schemes are kind of an extra, whereas allies and things are kind of an essential, and especially that we're used to deck building with. But something I do for Cable and Cyclops quite often, almost all the time, especially in certain aspects, is I go over 40 cards with them because they don't think they have anything essential they need urgently. And, one card I might say maybe they do, Grey Malkin on Cable, you do have build support, which can go and grab that, which is really nice. So there's definitely different strategies around those, which I think are really interesting. And I do like what you're saying about Cyclops there. I will say I do like bringing a lot of X-Men allies with him, but the X-Men allies are so good, you can take kind of different ones and you still get really, really good results. And something I like doing with Cyclops is actually not playing him in leadership. I think that's really fun. I think that's what most people know him as, but I love building him in aggression and justice. And fortunately, the X-Men came with, what is it called? Attack training, mission training, those kind of ones that you, these upgrades that go on your X-Men and, make them better at attacking or fording. And I have a lot of fun experimenting with those. I also have kind of a hybrid X-Men Shield Justice deck because
that's cool.
The Global Logistics, one of my favorite cards in the game, is actually a tactic, and actually so is Homeland Intervention. But I mainly go there for Global Logistics, and I'm just using Tactical Brilliance to keep bringing it back into hand and make sure the villain can't do anything they want to. I'm just picking all those weak encounter cards. Like, yeah, I'll have those.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so I think that poses a fun question. So Cyclops, I like to build Cyclops in leadership. I feel like that's really fun. You like to build them in the aggression and justice builds. What about Cable? Like, what is the base aspect? So unlike Adam Warlock and Spider-Woman, you're not picking 2 or 4 aspects. You're picking 1 aspect, and then you can sprinkle in some on non-chosen aspect cards. So like with Cyclops, I really like leadership. For Cable, my go-to for power is probably justice. I guess for fun, probably protection. I really like Ascani Sun and being able to like defend and remove threat. But what is your base? What is your preferential base aspect for Cable?
Interesting. I would say for power, I would go Justice as well. Definitely in solo play, I think that's phenomenal. If you can sort of coordinate deck builds in multiplayer, if someone else in the Justice aspect is going to help you clear the side schemes, you can do a lot of other fun stuff with Cable. I will say I love leadership Cable. I think the X-Force kind of archetype was really designed around him. I look at those cards, the way it works on the side schemes, then it comes with him, and he is the leader of the X-Force. Traditionally, it just all fits together really nicely. And I like leadership. Listeners probably know you like protection, so I guess it makes sense in some way.
Yep.
But I will say in solo play, I can enjoy Cable in any aspect. In multiplayer, it depends on how coordinated things are, because I feel like if I'm not justice or leadership with a very threat removal oriented build, I can struggle. I've tried deck builds in like 3 and 4 player with containment strategy for him, and it feels kind of awkward. It doesn't feel like it matches up to justice with even the odds. I mean, it was never going to match up that well, but it just feels like it's such a huge step down in terms of consistency and reliability. So although fun and a really unique interaction, I do justice and leadership. Leadership's for fun, justice for power. And I will say aggression solo has actually been surprisingly fun as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Alrighty. So that brings us to the last multi-aspect hero that we currently have, and that's Gamora. So Gamora is a little different because you pick an aspect and then you can take attack and or thwart events, up to 6 of them from different aspects. So I would say Gamora outside of Deadpool, but let's remove Deadpool from the conversation. I think Gamora is the most restricted on her multi-aspect use here because you're limited to 6, and they have to be attack or thwart events. What are your thoughts around Gamora?
Yeah, it's interesting. With Deadpool, we did talk about him, I think, in the previous episode a little while ago, so I'm not too worried. But Gamora is, I don't think she's as restricted. I think there's a lot of attack and thwarting cards, except in leadership. Or, but I do think she has a lot of choices for those. And what I think is interesting for her is, whereas Cyclops doesn't necessarily need X-Men, but they can definitely help out. Cable really does need those player side schemes. Gamora, I don't have to take cards from outside the aspect if I don't want to. A lot of the time, I think there's such good synergies within the aspects now. I actually sometimes, if I'm like Aggression Gamora, I might not take any cards from outside the aspect, especially if I'm running something like No Quarter, which I have tried with her before. So there's some really interesting stuff you can do. So while yes, you've got to have these attack and thwart, and there are only a certain amount, and they're of varying quality, I should say. There's certainly ones she doesn't really want to go for quite often. She doesn't actually have to go for any of them, and her game plan, how she plays, was still completely robust and very powerful. So I do quite like that aspect, but it is interesting how she can take cards from, let's say, if you're playing Injustice, you could have an aggression attack, you could have a leadership attack, you could have protection attacks, you could have 2 from each aspect. I normally, if I'm playing Injustice, I'll quite often have 6 aggression attacks or something, to kind of balance that out. So I don't know, how do you build with Gamora? Do you find you usually build all from one aspect, or do you mix things up and take a variety of cards?
I don't necessarily know if I have an answer to that without thinking about it a little bit longer. What I do with Gamora is if I am building into heavy thwarting, I offset the damage with attack events and vice versa. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm primarily a solo player, and so I do have to cover all the grounds in the game. But 2, a lot of her events play off of, if you have played an attack, you get to remove more thwart, or vice versa. If you played a thwart already, you get to do more damage with some of her in-kit cards. Plus, her hero ability, you want to be trying to play a attack and a thwart event each time to get that ping damage and threat removal bonus. So if I'm running heavy into aggression, I have a lot of attack events. I'm probably looking for more threat removal cards like Fort Justice. If it's a higher player game, maybe Crisis Averted. Clear the Area is a really good one that I like to grab in solo play. So a lot of that. But if I'm running a high justice build, maybe I'm looking for some of the less expensive, because that's the other thing that I really want to do is I want to be playing a lot of cards with Gamora typically. So I want to be I'm looking for like 1x1s. I'm looking for other cheap cards that aren't coming to my mind right now, precision strikes, that kind of thing. So I kind of look for, if I'm building my main deck is all attack, I'm looking to offset with thwart. There are a couple of ones that I like to gravitate towards. I really do like Momentum Shift for Gamora, heal 2, deal 2, easy to play. I like Turn the Tide. Especially, I just played a Fluid Motion deck with Gamora, which I thought was a lot of fun. Where Fluid Motion, every time you play an attack event, you get to exhaust it, you get +1 to your attack for the rest of the round. Gamora has some of the very few 0-cost attack events in the game. You offset that with Turn the Tide as well. Now Turn the Tide does 3 damage whenever you thwart down a side scheme, and you get to ping a threat. So there's a couple of those. Clear the Area is another one that I'm always gravitating towards. But there's a lot of cards that I really like for Gamora, and I think there are just some that are higher power level than the others. And so I find myself, whenever I'm playing Gamora, kind of gravitating towards the same, 6 to 8 choices.
Yeah, I think that's still, very valid. I do, those taking free Clear the Area and free Turn the Tide when I'm in aggression just feels so good, it's really strong. So yeah, no, I mean, I completely sympathize. I do like to try and mix it up, but sometimes, you got to do what you got to do. You got to cash in on those big money cards, those really powerful cards that do a lot for their cost, even though they're cheap. The values, the efficiency is just through the roof. So no, I 100% agree. Something I think is interesting, kind of on a slightly different topic, but also on a similar one, with Cable and Cyclops. we brought up pretty much all the aspects. I actually didn't mention protection with Cyclops, but I do enjoy that as well. To a lesser degree, I still think he does well there. He's probably the best user of the Mutant Protectors card in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with Gamora, I already feel like she's kind of locked into aggression or justice. You can play her in protection, and I think it can do well, but I think she does extremely well in aggression and justice. And she can do well in leadership because, leadership is leadership. I do like recurring Nebula, her signature ally, which fetches her an event. I've talked about that before, I think, with you. But really, I think aggression and justice just stand out so much higher for her. And I think more recent heroes tend to work with more aspects in general, whereas older ones, sometimes they just have a couple of aspects that don't really click with them. What do you think about that?
Yeah. That makes sense. I agree. I don't really ever consider running Gamora outside of aggression or justice. I did have a leadership build. I think it was a leadership build that's sparked the from your comment about using and recurring Nebula, where my off aspect cards were Dropkick and Concussive Blow. So I think I either brought 2 of each and offset it, but just ran a stun lock because she has those Keen Instincts, which are the wild generators, so she can hit the resource requirements for those cards, and you can just status lock the villain like absurdly well. So I thought that was kind of fun, but I run aggression, and really I just kind of run aggression. I don't really see myself doing a lot of justice. It's mainly aggression, and I splash the justice cards.
Yeah, I think she works really well with the status cards because she's so event focused. She's one of the most event focused heroes in the game, probably alongside Miss Marvel and maybe Nova. She really, really wants to be hitting those attack and force to trigger her hero abilities, which are, I think, finesse and precision, which ping a damage when you fought or pings a threat removal when you damage. Those are really, really good to trigger. So you can run less allies and more status cards kind of to protect you. Works absolutely phenomenally well. And I think that makes sense. Knowing you as a predominantly solo player, she has so much natural threat removal with that one threat you can keep pinging. I think Justice can quite a lot of the time be overkill in solo play. Whereas I think, Justice in 2-player, which is my primary count, is a really nice fit for her as well.
That makes sense. The last thing that I wanted to talk about Gamora is her sword. So Gamora's sword is a 3-cost upgrade. Whenever you play an attack event, you get to ping a damage, which is really good. But I feel like a lot of the times I've lost tempo if I don't see that sword early, or if I'm not getting the benefit out in a solo game. In a multiplayer game, it's very, very, very good. But lock and load, I think, has been so phenomenal for Gamora, being able to thwart 2, which is her base thwart, and get her sword out really early, or you basically have a second instance of that sword. If you top deck the sword, you can play it, or you can toss it and just grab lock and load and play it for cheaper. But that is fun. I really enjoyed that. I played a 2-handed game with the sword, and I like the sword. The sword's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the sword is really, really fun. But like you say, it's so expensive. You use tempo and so on. What I would love is that lock and load. Like you say, I think she's actually really good with side schemes, player side schemes in general, because she has so much natural threat removal, which, not a lot of characters, especially from back then, the first couple of expansions, can really say. So that works super, super well. So yeah, running those cheap attacks like you were talking about alongside that sword, just pinging out all that damage, pinging it, when you fought with her as well from her, I think it's a precision ability. Really, really fun. So I still love Gamora. She's just fallen outside of my, top 10, top 15 heroes, but she's still right up there. I always have a fun time when I play Gamora.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah,
really, really like all these heroes.
So those are the, I guess, 6/5 multi-aspect heroes. I want to pose a question to the community, to the listeners. Which one of those is your favorite and why? Do you like the deck building? Do you like the hero kit? And then I have a question. So let us know in the comments, or if you're going to email in a question for us, which we're going to transition to here real quick. Email us at shadowofthecast@gmail.com. But I have a question for you, which I also want to pose to the listeners. What do you, if we're going to get more multi-aspect heroes in the future, what do you see as a potential direction that they could go in the design space for multi-aspect heroes?
That's a really good question. And I think I have to take inspiration from Arkham Horror, which is where I can only assume the inspiration for this kind of, approach has come from in the first place. Where a lot of characters there, they are restricted to taking cards from, say, a different aspect or any aspect that are from a certain trait. And we already have that with Cyclops, we already have that with Cable, we already have that with Gamora. but they also sometimes restrict them to cost. And I think taking cards from certain costs from other aspects could be really interesting. Maybe you can take up to, I don't know, 4 cost cards from other aspects, and then that hero could have a mechanic around, maybe it's a very rich character around, playing these big cards to get a reward for it. You could do all sorts. Maybe you don't want to restrict the numbers. You could take it anywhere, but I think using some of the other features on the cards, maybe to do with the resources, you can take a physical resource from, I don't know, a different aspect. I mean, Hulk would probably really appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I could see that also with like a genius character, like a Reed Richards or something, taking mental resources from any aspect. That's a really fun direction to go in. Another direction that was brought up on one of my streams recently is the flip side of that and having multi-aspect cards. So Arkham has this. I don't know if Lord of the Rings has this or not, but where you could have an aggression justice card. And so if you're playing either of those aspects, you can take that card. And so it's not necessarily what we're talking about here, but it is kind of in the same ballpark as multi-aspect heroes, as multi-aspect cards. So I think we still have a lot of design space that they can explore in this game. I'm pretty excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, that would blow my mind if we had cards like that. And I really think that would help out. Maybe certain cards that, aren't really appropriate for basic, like they don't want everyone to have access to it, and it's appropriate for more than one aspect. That would be great, and I think that probably helps solo players a lot, because probably a lot of things, I know aggression would love a little bit more threat removal, but maybe they don't want to give more of that to justice or something like that. If they announced it, I would lose my mind.
The deck building possibilities are endless.
How would that work with multi-aspect characters? What if Spider-Woman could take like an aggression/leadership card and then a justice/protection card? She could bring that all together.
What would it count as? Would it count as both? Would it count as one? Who knows?
We would need a lot of rules.
Yep. 100%. Oh my goodness. Alrighty, you want to talk about some community questions? We've got a couple of community questions that have been sent in. You want to?
We've had a few community questions come in, while I've been away, while, we had a lot of December stuff going down. So I'm going to ask a question that's coming from Mark from Hamburg in Germany. And I don't think we ever talk about this, but it's really cool, that we have a worldwide audience. You're obviously in the US, I'm from the UK, but we have people from all over the world. I see comments from all different kinds of people, and that's fantastic. So I really, really enjoy that. But Mark here asks a really interesting question, kind of a couple of questions. But the first one is, do you think the new heroes are stronger than the first heroes? I know this is a bit of a contentious topic sometimes in the Marvel Champions community. I think we've even had power creep maybe sort of be a little topic on the podcast before, but specifically the heroes. If let's take, say, the core set and the next evolution set, how do you think those compare?
So this kind of can bleed into the next section of the podcast, which is talking about, content coming up on our channels. This is one of the videos that I have in the pipeline. Is power creep a problem, or is it a thing in Marvel Champions? And I think my stance is that no, it is not. I think that there has been power creep. I don't think it's a problem. I think that the design of the core set heroes is objectively, the cards are not as good as a whole compared to those of Next Evolution. I think that's not necessarily they're trying to make the heroes better. I think that's just they've learned where the game lives. They've understand the game has grown. The game is alive. It knows it. They're learning more about that. I think that there is a perception of power creep more so than there is an actual power creep, because the new heroes have access to a full card pool, whereas a lot of people have not revisited some of the older heroes with the full card pool. And so I think the older hero or the newer heroes seem stronger because they can take all these epic new cards. And I think the aspect cards or the basic cards are a bigger or have more of a power creep than the heroes themselves. So if you go back and you play Black Panther, like we've both put out some Black Panther decks recently, right? You put out the Pool Panther, the Pink Panther deck. That one was fun.
It wasn't called Pink Panther, but it should have been.
And then I did a Gamora, a Call for Backup Gamora deck for the Grab Wakanda Forever's, and that's both of those are really powerful and really strong, and I would put them in contention with some of the newer heroes and the power level there. So I think it's more of a they're not being looked at in the same scope, and I think that's the thesis of the video that I'm working on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm definitely going to have to check that video out because I find this topic really interesting. I still rate Captain Marvel, is top 10. I think her power is basically card draw, and the more new cards that are powerful that come in, she just keeps getting better and better. I do think overall new heroes are getting a little stronger. Just everything's a little bit more convenient or flexible for the most part. A bit heightened forwarding. This is something I was looking at recently for a new topic. I'm actually starting a new series on my channel where I'm looking at how the aspects interact with the heroes and how to put them together. And a lot of the heroes from Sinister Motives onwards generally have much stronger forwarding than before that. You can see the difference is quite stark in contrast. Yeah, we have characters like Colossus who don't have much, but that feels like it's more of an intended design rather than just, the nature of all characters at that time.
Yeah. I got a question here from Ray, who is from a Moon Knight podcast, which I just rewatched Moon Knight on Disney Plus. Fantastic, trippy show. It's weird. I still think I don't understand everything. So there's that, but it was a very good watch. But they ask, are we avid comic book readers? Or is Marvel Hit coming solo from Marvel Champions?
That's a great question. So I historically haven't read many comic books. I watched a lot of TV shows growing up. I did read like an odd issue or thing here and there, but nothing very serious, nothing I could remember these days, But I have tried to get back into reading them a little bit these days. But I have tried to get into reading them these days. I've read a few X-Men issues. I've read quite a bit of Guardians. Now, not, a lot, but by my standards, quite a bit. And I've read Daredevil, which I've really been enjoying. So I'm not an avid comic book reader, but when I do it, I do enjoy it. And in terms of Marvel being, my Marvel hits coming from Marvel Champions, I actually really like the MCU as well. I do watch most of that, if not all of it. So I definitely absorb a lot of it from those places.
Yeah, I would not describe myself as an avid comic book reader by any means. We actually kind of started rereading or starting to read comic books right around the same time as each other, which was funny. I think we had that discussion off air at one point, but we're like, oh yeah, I think we both came, and we usually start recording probably a good half hour after we've joined the call, just because we chat, and we're like, I signed up for Marvel Unlimited. It's like, me too. I'm like, whoa. Yeah. So that happened on this same like week together, which was fun. But I've fallen off of that, which I do need to get back into because I have really enjoyed them. I will say that Marvel Champions kind of sparked my love for Marvel more so than the other way around, where I didn't really follow the MCU. I watched the movies because I like explosions and stuff, and that was fun. But like, I didn't know the intertwinedness of all the characters and everything, but once I started playing the characters and playing the game, I started understanding who the characters were, and I've rewatched the MCU I think twice now since I've played like the entire thing, since I've started playing, and I've really enjoyed that. So they just announced Iceman as a hero.
Are you for real?
Yeah, I refreshed and I was like, oh, it's happening. So, okay. And so let's transition into what we're playing this week in the outro so we can take a look at Iceman, because I love new heroes and I want to talk about that. So a little bit of a meta break here in the podcast, but what are you playing this week?
You know what? I don't know what I'm playing this week. I know what I'm doing this week, and it's probably making a video about Iceman.
Nice.
So keep an eye out for that. Coming up on my channel, I have just started a series on the aspects and things which I mentioned, how to pair things up. So that's something I'm going to be doing. I'm also starting a new series about underappreciated or underrated cards which have fallen by the wayside, which people would maybe aren't very flashy, or people have forgotten about. Maybe older cards that I'm not necessarily saying are going to be the card to save you from Expert Ronin, the answer to all your problems, but cards that really have a place, that are fun, that are worth using, to just bring some love to those kind of shorter videos, but not actually YouTube shorts. So that's something I'm looking to start very soon. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, so we talked about the power creep video a little bit earlier in the podcast. One of the other things that I've been working on is I did a re-rank using the Pub Meeple ranking engine for Marvel Champions, and so I'm doing a video where I'm comparing those results to my results from a year ago, just to kind of see how my tastes have changed. I have a lot of video ideas, and so I don't want to commit to too many of them, but fun stuff.
That sounds really interesting. I might have to bother you for the link for that ranking of heroes.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
Very cool. But yeah, I think that's just about going to wrap it up for today, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sending in your questions. If you want to send any more in, please let us know at shadowofthecast@gmail.com. We're always very happy to receive them. If you're listening to this on YouTube, hit us up in the comments. I'm sure if Nelson receives any, he'll pass them on as well. So that's all fantastic. I'm just really excited about Iceman, if I'm honest, guys. I can't really concentrate. But yeah, why don't you tell listeners about the next episode we have lined up?
Yeah, so the next episode, which again is going to be the third Monday of every single month, so the third Monday of February, we're going to be talking about Nemesis sets. And this is kind of being teased up with Standard 3 coming out in Age of Apocalypse, which we're going to be seeing a lot more of Nemesis sets the more we play Standard 3. Also, Shadow of the Cast, Shadow of the Past, very tie-in heavy there with us. So we're going to be talking about some Nemesis sets and how those have an impact on the game. So make sure to subscribe to wherever you're listening to the podcast, either on Villain Theory's channel or on Spotify, or Villains put it everywhere, I'm pretty sure. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that.
Yeah, really excited for that episode. Little teaser, we might have a mystery guest as well for the first time on the podcast. Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows?
And yeah, no, thank you guys for listening. It's been fun. It's good to be back.
Excellent. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you around.
Bye.
Bye.
Iceman.
Iceman.